right, folks. So I do want to talk about the James Comey indictment. Little update here. J.D. Vance says there's more where that came from. More indictments where that came from. Just in, Vice President J.D. Vance fires back at leftists claiming a grand jury in Alexandria, Virginia, indicting James Comey is political. And so let's take a look at J.D. Vance.
With this, President Trump has said that the indictment of James Comey is justice, not revenge. There is pushback to that, of course, among Democrats, including Senator Tim Kaine, who is calling it a complete political hatchet job. The president has said, quote, there will be others. And in the past, he has listed Adam Schiff and Letitia James. Do you think there are more indictments coming, and do you think that's justified?
Well, there's certainly going to be more indictments coming over the next 3.5 years of the Trump administration, but we're always going to let the law drive this stuff and the facts of the case and not political motivations, which frankly makes us so much different from the Biden administration, where they indicted not just the President of the United States, but so many people who were just engaged in the basic job of politics, who were engaged in policymaking, who disagreed with the Biden administration, and because that they faced prosecution from that same administration. If you look at the Comey indictment, Martha, this was a grand jury indictment delivered in Alexandria, Virginia, not exactly a hotbed of Donald Trump's political support. There were three requested indictments. The grand jury returned 2 of those 3 indictments. So I think they showed they were judicious. I think that it showed clearly that there were a couple of things that James Comey did wrong. And to the people who are saying that this is all political, I mean, look, if you look at our track record in the Trump administration, there have been people who have been prosecuted, who have been political allies, who agree with our politics. There have been people who disagree with our politics. We're not letting politics drive this. We're letting the requirements of the justice system and the law drive this. And unfortunately for James Comey, when I look at this indictment, I see a guy who lied under oath, and he'll have his day in court. He'll have his opportunity to prove the other case in front of the jury. But the idea that this is driven by politics, I think is preposterous when you actually read the details of the indictment and the obvious fact that James Comey did lie under oath to Congress multiple times.
All right, we'll see.
All right. Well, I feel much better. I don't know about you, but that was very reassuring. Lisa Murkowski speaks out after Comey indictments. She's one of the moderate Republicans there, quote unquote. The Department of Justice has long been insulated from presidential administrations to protect public trust in the rule of law. But that independence is called into question when overt political pressure from the White House leads to unusual personnel changes and criminal charges filed just days after the president calls for them. Exactly. So we don't have to read the rest of that. But we do have to back things up here to September 20th when Donald Trump truthed this out here, which some people suspect was intended as a private text message to Pam Bondi. This is not the first time there's been speculation that he's accidentally tweeted something that he's meant to text. I've never done that. I don't know anybody who's ever done that. So why is the president doing that on repeat occasion? I don't know. Or is he? Or was this intended as public pressure? Only Donald Trump knows that, I suppose. Pam, I have reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old story as last time. All talk, no action. Nothing is being done. What about Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, Letitia? They're all guilty as hell, but nothing is going to be done. Then we almost put in a Democrat-supported U.S. attorney in Virginia with a really bad Republican past, a woke rhino who was never going to do his job. That's why 2 of the worst Democrat senators pushed him so hard. He even lied to the media and said he quit and that he had no case, and that we had no case. So I fired him, and there is a great case, and many lawyers and legal pundits say so. Lindsey Halligan is a really good lawyer and likes you a lot. We can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now. President Donald J. Trump. Okay, so you can see what Vance saying, the fact that Alexandria, Virginia is not a hotbed of Trump support, that's a red herring, because obviously this personnel change was made with the intention of sneaking this indictment in right under the wire, because the statute of limitations was to expire the Tuesday after this indictment came down. So we'll go into the case a little bit. Former FBI Director James Comey indicted following pressure from Trump. Former FBI Director James Comey was indicted Thursday, days after President Donald Trump publicly said that U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi should prosecute him and two other political adversaries. The indictment includes 2 counts, making a false statement and obstruction of a congressional proceeding. Comey has denied any wrongdoing. The charges stem from testimony Comey gave on September 30th, 2020, 5 years ago today, during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. Asked by Senator Ted Cruz of Texas about testimony he gave in 2017, asserting he did not authorize the leak of information to the media about an FBI investigation into the Clinton Foundation, Comey said, "I stand by the testimony." Comey's deputy, Andrew McCabe, has said that Comey authorized him to leak information to the press, according to a 2018 Justice Department Inspector General's report. But the report also found that McCabe made multiple false or misleading statements. The statute of limitations for the charges was set to expire Tuesday. That's this Tuesday. Comey could face a maximum of 5 years in prison if convicted. Trump celebrated the indictment. Justice in America, says Trump. One of the worst human beings in this country has ever been exposed to is James Comey, the former corrupt head of the FBI. Today, he was indicted by a grand jury on 2 felony counts for various illegal and unlawful acts. He has been so bad for our country for so long and is now at the beginning of being held responsible for his crimes against our nation. Make America great again. Pam Bondi was more tepid in her tweet. Notice she didn't give the usual, "We will come for you, we will find you, we will go after you." She says, "No one is above the law. Today's indictment reflects this Department of Justice's commitment to holding those who abuse positions of power accountable for misleading the American people. We will follow the facts in this case." So she does not seem as confident as Donald Trump, as evidenced by the fact that it took a push from Donald Trump for her to do this in the first place. So let's take a look at the testimony explained at the heart of the Comey indictment. So here is the exchange at issue. This is in 2020. This is Ted Cruz versus James Comey. This is what they're going after him for.
Never.
Oops, sorry. I got to cue this up. I forgot. There we go.
On May 3rd, 2017, in this committee, Chairman Grassley asked you point blank, quote, "Have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?" You responded under oath, quote, "Never." He then asked you, quote, "Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration?" You responded again under oath, "No." Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
So notice they're not going after Comey for that 2017 testimony because the statute of limitations on that has expired. So what they're going after him for is his recounting of that testimony. So when Comey says, right, "I stand by that prior testimony," that in itself, he could argue is not a lie because he's saying, "No, I'm telling the truth. I do stand by that prior testimony." Now, if that prior testimony was a lie, the statute of limitations is expired on that. So could they prosecute him for that? Right? That's a technical argument, but it's an argument that he may be able to make because they're trying to nail him on testimony about prior testimony that they can't prosecute him for because the time limit has passed.
Right. Your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak. And Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
On May 3rd,
see, so he's very careful about what he says. Yeah. He's very careful to say,
it's very lawyerly.
Very lawyerly. He's very careful to say, "I stand by that testimony." In other words, he's not asserting what he asserted in the prior testimony. He's saying, "I stand by it," right? Which is technically true. He stands by it. Now, if the underlying testimony is a lie, can you nail him for that? I don't know. Could be tough. Could be tough. Mr. Cruz was in turn recounting an exchange at a Senate hearing on May 3rd, 2017. At the time, Senator Charles Grassley, a Republican of Iowa, asked Mr. Comey whether he had ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation. Mr. Comey responded, no. The 2017 exchange itself falls outside the 5-year statute of limitations to charge someone with making a false statement. So Mr. Comey is being charged for saying in 2020 that he stood by having said no, and that his testimony was the same today. In context, Mr. Grassley was clearly referring to the investigation into the Trump campaign's possible ties to Russia and to the investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of an email server. So here's James Comey responding to the indictment, saying, let's have a trial.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees, and you shouldn't either. Somebody that I love dearly recently said that fear is the tool of a tyrant, and she's right. But I'm not afraid, and I hope you're not either. I hope instead you are engaged, you are paying attention, and you will vote like your beloved country depends upon it, which it does. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
All right. Now, why the case against James Comey may end in humiliation for Trump's DOJ. So I'm going to give you a couple different perspectives on this and how it might go. All right. We're going to read the argument for and the argument against. The president's public pressure. So one way to get a case dismissed is to argue that it's the product of a selective or vindictive prosecution. It's notoriously difficult to have a case tossed on that basis because defendants must show that prosecutors acted on improper motives and influences. Well, that could be a common defense in the coming years, I have a feeling. Trump tried unsuccessfully to get his own criminal charges dismissed on these grounds before he returned to the White House. Now, here's where you have to say, regardless of the merits of this case, that, yeah, this is, of course, James Comey getting a taste of his own medicine. Glenn Greenwald did a video talking about how Comey basically tripped up Martha Stewart into prosecuting her for bullshit reasons because he thought it would be a good feather in his cap for his career. And I would argue he opted not to indict Hillary Clinton for the email server because he thought not indicting her would be a way to advance his career. So, you know, I'm not breaking out the violins for James Comey here. And, you know, this is very much him getting a taste of his own medicine. To me, that's not the most important part of the story, however. So, but in Comey's case, there is ample public evidence that the charges were not the result of prosecutors' neutral assessment of the facts. Rather, they appear to have been brought at the behest of a president seeking to use prosecutorial muscle to settle an old score. Some Trump supporters have argued that Comey lied when he said he stood by the earlier testimony because they believe Comey did authorize his deputy FBI director, Andrew McCabe, to leak information about the Clinton probe to the Wall Street Journal. Comey and McCabe have provided differing accounts of a conversation the two men had on the day after the Journal published a story on the probe, although there's no indication McCabe has ever claimed he got advance permission from Comey for any leak. So in other words, he's saying he got permission retroactively. So here is Republican Andrew McCarthy saying on Fox News, talking about being a wet towel on Fox News, saying, I don't think this case goes to trial.
I love Ted, but McCabe never said that Comey authorized it. What McCabe said was that McCabe authorized it. This is a leak to the Wall Street Journal. And then he told Comey about it later. The only way that you could convict Comey beyond a reasonable doubt is Comey would have to truly believe that he personally had authorized the leak. He would have to actually have authorized the leak, and then he would have had to know that he was lying when he denied it to the Senate. they're not even going to be able to prove that he authorized the leak because, by all accounts, he didn't. So I don't think this case even gets to trial.
All right. So then.
All right. So, yeah, you can imagine how that went over at Fox News. Yeah.
Or at Racket News.
Or at Racket
News. Go over well over there either.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, look, I mean, what seems to have happened with this indictment is that they kind of waited till the last minute and then realized, oh, shit, our time is almost up. So we have to reshuffle the deck and hastily write, what was it, a 2-page indictment based on testimony about prior testimony. Seems just, characteristic of this administration, half-assed, put together at the last minute without much forethought, without much care for the truth of the matter. And so it seems as though these charges may not stick. But there's one more thing. I got to do a Columbo thing. There's just one more thing. There's just one more thing, unfortunately. James Comey could face more charges as DOJ sifts through evidence, but will the case stick? Well, talk about how McCarthy just took a giant shit in the middle of the Fox News studio. Michael Cohen does the same thing here on MSNBC. Michael Cohen wants...
They got to switch studios.
They got to switch studios. Right. They're in the wrong studio. No, they're on the wrong TV show. Because, on Fox, you're supposed to say, oh, yeah, no, Comey is going to go away for life. And on MSNBC, you're supposed to say, well, this is a horrible politically motivated prosecution. Comey did nothing wrong. And Michael Cohen, ally turned sworn enemy of Donald Trump, comes out and says, basically, Comey is a scumbag, and whether these charges will stick, they have access to all his communications, and I'm sure they're going to find something. So let's hear from Michael Cohen, really just throwing a wet towel on the MSNBC studio.
We really know whether or not Comey is or is not guilty of the charges. I know that they parade out all of these pundits. They have the great titles in the Chiron, former prosecutor, yada, yada, former FBI. Who's seen a single document that's in the possession right now of the DOJ? The answer is nobody. Who has the crystal ball? Still nobody. I will tell you from my investigation, which I used Brian Karem, who's a 30-year White House correspondent, to speak to people inside government because they wouldn't talk to me. I've learned that Comey was actually very much involved in the Russia investigation in a very negative way. And chances are this DOJ has every single email, every text message, every communication. I believe likely he will be found guilty.
Oh, well, that's interesting because
I think likely
right.
Oh, well.
What? What specifically?
Now I actually have to use my brain and respond to you. I thought this was just going to be we all reinforce each other's opinion and we go to happy hour. No, now I'm going to actually have to engage.
That's funny. That's funny. Like it's definitely the bizarro world version of the two studios. Yeah, like they couldn't believe he said this. Like could not believe that he said this. One more time.
Oh, well, that's interesting because
I think he likely committed a crime.
Wait, what? What
I believe likely he committed a crime. I don't know what that crime is, but there are hundreds of thousands of documents, and government has each and every one of them. All they need to find is that one.
This guy's a massive piece of shit. I'm sure he did something. That's basically what he's saying there. And he is pressed for clarification at a later point. This is a separate tweet. With the embedded video, and he ends up getting said clarification.
Now, is that the Department of what you're saying right now is that the Department of Justice under Donald Trump has been weaponized or has not been weaponized?
I think it's been weaponized under more than just Donald Trump. I think it's been weaponized by government for, I don't know, as long as it's been around.
Well, because I think your argument is it was weaponized then by Comey against Donald Trump. That's what you're arguing right now. And so you think...
Don't forget, this guy went to jail for Donald Trump because the DOJ was weaponized against Donald Trump. This guy should be like, yeah, I took it in the ass up in Otisville for 2 years because it was weaponized against Donald Trump. Believe me, I know. Believe me, I know.
Your argument is it was weaponized then by Comey against Donald Trump. That's what you're arguing right now. And so you think that there will be evidence that will show that in court and so thus validate Donald Trump's vendetta against James Comey.
At least I couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, well, of course. Don't forget, you're talking to a guy who went to jail for Donald Trump because they weaponized the Justice Department against Donald Trump. So, of course, that's going to be his line. And look, he may be right. I mean, he's in the inner circle. His attitude is, yeah, there was dirty pool played against Donald Trump. Of course there was. Everybody knows there was. And now Donald Trump is playing dirty pool against them. Now, because this administration is so incompetent, they obviously just waited until the very last minute for Donald Trump to have a meltdown that the statute of limitations was expiring. And so they had to throw something together with toothpicks and bubblegum at the last second, which is what they did, which is why these charges may not stick. But on the other hand, yeah, Comey is a massive liar. Russiagate was a massive hoax. And the more they look around, the more likely they are to find something. And so my macro take on this is like, look, if all Trump were doing were sticking it up the ass of these deep state goons who made his life hell, I wouldn't like it. You know, I don't like the carceral state. You will never catch me in an inconsistency on this. I think prison is a last resort for everybody, whether they're left wing, whether they're right wing. I hated the way they railroaded the January 6 people.
You ever see a Norwegian prison?
Yeah, well, that's
not a prison. That's a retirement plan.
Right. Yeah, that's yeah.
I lived in Norway. I might go to Norway when I'm 65 and commit a crime.
Yeah, that's an old folks home. Exactly. Yeah. So like I hate it in every direction. I hate what they did to the January 6 people. I hate what they tried to do to the African People's Socialist Party. I am against, throwing people in jail unnecessarily unless you absolutely have to. To me, that's what jail is for. It's an absolute last resort. So I wouldn't like it if they were just doing this as a tit for tat. But you know what? I would tolerate it because, yeah, these people are scumbags. They did draw first blood. Like, what the Democrats did to the January 6th. I mean, those January 6 people were political prisoners. They were legit political prisoners. Jacob Chansley was a political prisoner. This was a guy with a documented history of mental illness. He's a documented schizophrenic. Video evidence showed he clearly did not intend to harm anyone at the Capitol. He's being escorted around by the cops. Clearly an unwell guy. And they railroaded him to make an example of him and tried to put him away for, 5-6 years? I forget the exact math because they counted, I think, time served toward the final sentence. But whatever. They tried to lock him up for a very long time. That's a political prisoner. So, yes, the Democrats opened this door. So if you wanted to settle scores by going after the people who did that, again, in principle, I wouldn't love it. I'm against jail in principle, but I could stomach that. But that's not what they're doing. They're clearly trying to make life hell for everyone who doesn't agree with every single part of their agenda. And this is a piece of that. Chris Hedges just wrote an article talking about how, they're likely to come for these high-profile functionaries of the liberal establishment first in order to chip away at the infrastructure that will be necessary to defend everybody else. And once that happens, it's open season on everybody. And if that weren't what their agenda was, I could, maybe slip a mischievous grin in about this. But that's not what this is. This is the first step towards just going after everyone you don't like. It's pretty obvious. And this is why I say, like, these people have just completely tanked their own credibility in every way. They have executed their mandate in such incredible bad faith across the board, on the criminal justice front, on the Ukraine war front, which is now a complete 180, on the immigration front. There's a video, we're probably going to show it on Thursday. John Farina over at Status Quo got this, of this guy holding a sign outside the ICE facility talking about how, he knows this, young girl who's an autistic girl. She's got, mental problems, emotional problems. And her mother was just disappeared by ICE. And this girl cannot get by without her mom. Okay? Like, she can't function without her mom. This is, is a special needs kid who didn't do anything wrong, whatever her mother did. She's a child. She's innocent.
Should have thought of that before she got vaccinated.
Yeah, exactly. She's innocent by definition. And now she's being tortured because her mother crossed the border. So, like, let's say that mother has to be deported. There's not a way to do that in an orderly fashion so you keep the family together so that this poor autistic girl is not collateral damage. Like, this is what I mean. Like, you want to mandate if you had just executed your mandate, you wouldn't be underwater in the polls right now, but they're not. They're abusing every facet of their mandate. And so that to me is what this is a part of, right? If it were just this, you could say, all right, yeah, fine. You know what? You want to harass Nancy Pelosi over her insider trading portfolio? Fine. If that's all you're doing, I don't think most people would shed any tears about that. But this is clearly part of a broader agenda. And it's a shame. It's a shame because this is like I said, they have just done everything in such bad faith that you can't even take pleasure when they stick it up James Comey's ass, which would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, put him and Michael Cohen together. They could stick it up each other's ass.
Yeah, they ruined a good time.
They might like that.
They ruined a good time.
Yeah. This is the problem when one of these sides becomes ascendant, it goes after the other. It's Freddy versus Jason. Who do you vote?
Downward spiral.
Who do you root for? It's monsters fighting each other.
Right.
Yeah, Comey is a piece of shit. I'm sure Michael Cohen is right. I'm sure you go through those files, you will find things that, although given the way he answered that question, he might have been smart enough not to leave much of a paper trail behind.
Well, he's a pro. That's the thing.
He's a pro. So they might not find much that would hold up in court. In theory, did James Comey weaponize the Justice Department? Was he always one of these people who went after high-profile prosecutions like Martha Stewart, where most people don't realize this. I didn't realize this until this broke, and I did some research. They didn't even prosecute her for insider trading. They did the same thing they did to Flynn.
Yeah,
they got him
on
false statement of the FBI.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this was a common tactic of his, to go after a high-profile prosecution.
Oh, yeah.
Where he could get a lot of time in front of the cameras. And then if he couldn't get them on the underlying crime, he would get them on the interview.
Oh, this is what they do. The FBI, this is what they do. They trick people into incriminating themselves.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, prosecutors do that too. Like, most of these people are fucking scum. Yeah. And James Comey is not an exception. He's the rule. But he kind of mastered that game. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure in principle he's guilty of things. Given his level of skill in covering his tracks, I'm not as confident as Cohen. But, yeah, I mean, in principle, I'm sure he is guilty of crimes. I am sure every fucking crackpot in that cabinet is guilty of crimes. This is why you can't really get excited about it.
Right.
So who are you rooting for? Donald Trump? Stephen Miller? Crazy Eyes Patel?
Right.
Tulsi, who's paying me? Well, that's my opinion.
Right.
Like, who here are you saying, oh, I'm rooting for them? And I'll tell you, man, I took a little crack at fucking compromised Matt Taibbi over there. But man, these people who, because they were so angry about Russiagate, and it's not just him, it's a lot of people, are gonna pump this up because they feel a certain personal vindication over it. Think about what Chris had just said. That's exactly it. Like, yeah, man, in principle, we all want to see these feckless liberals get theirs. But remember who's doing it and why. It has nothing to do with justice. So I think for a lot of people who are particularly, caught up in that issue in Russiagate, who were targeted by Russiagate, I get it, man. Like, it's very hard not to gas up these kinds of actions because these are people, especially if it personally affected you as a journalist or a commentator. But you got to think about what you're empowering. Like, I understand if you were put in that position, it's very hard to maintain your objectivity about it, but you can't just ignore who's doing it and what their motives are.
Right. And this is what I mean by you have to be conscious of whether or not this is being executed in good faith. Like if they were to come in and say, okay, you guys, I think the January 6th example is a powerful one because those were legitimate political prisoners. Like, they locked these people up.
Some of them.
For no reason.
Some of them. Not all of them.
A vast majority. I would argue a vast majority.
I would agree with that.
And even the ones who did something, who committed some offense, I think you could plausibly make a quasi entrapment argument
that they were goaded into being.
The whole thing was manufactured, and they were goaded into it, right?
Sure.
So that's why I wasn't against his decision to just pardon them all, because you know what, even the ones who were guilty, they were set up. They were clearly set up, right. And if somebody is entrapped, it means they're not guilty. So whatever, we're not going to spend years going through the paperwork while these people rot in jail for longer. So I'm like, that's fine. So like, if you want to say, okay, we are against the weaponization of the government against the American people, therefore we are going to find out what was behind these January 6th prosecutions, and we are going to get justice for those people, I think I would be all for that, since like Chansley's lawyers were not allowed to see that footage of him clearly doing nothing wrong. So like if that footage was not withheld from his legal defense, he would have been found not guilty, right? So like, you've committed a crime against that guy and held him as a political prisoner. So like, if you want to go and get justice for that, I personally would have no problem with that. But you can't say that out of one side of your mouth and then out of the other side of your mouth making speeches about how you're going after the enemy within and declaring war on your own people, because that is weaponization of a kind itself, obviously, right? And so this is what I mean. It's like you're just executing things in such bad faith that it's impossible to root for you even where I might otherwise.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Please clap.